How anxiety affects the brain. The structure and function of the brain are dramatically altered by anxiety, which has a significant impact on the parts and systems of the brain that are responsible for emotional regulation, stress responses, and cognitive processes. This intricate interaction has a substantial impact on both mental and physical health, highlighting the critical need for appropriate intervention and management techniques. In this video clip, to properly treat anxiety, it is necessary to not only alleviate its immediate symptoms, but also to restore the neurological balance that lies beneath them. This is extremely important for the mental and physical well-being of the individual over the long term. Effects of anxiety on the brain. Anxiety has a huge impact on the brain since it changes both its structure and its function. It has a particular impact on the effectiveness of the parasympathetic nervous system as well as the perception of danger and threat. When an individual is confronted with anxiety, the response system in their brain becomes highly activated. This activation mostly involves the amygdala, which is a region that plays a critical role in the processing of emotions and threats. This greater activation can result in a heightened perception of danger, even in circumstances that are not objectively threatening as compared to other conditions. Furthermore, anxiety affects the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that is accountable for doing higher-order thinking and making decisions. There is a possibility that this interference will hinder a person's capacity to control their emotional responses and to make sensible decisions. The parasympathetic nervous system, which is normally responsible for promoting calm and recuperation, becomes less effective when chronic anxiety is present. This imbalance can result in chronic physical symptoms such as an elevated heart rate and muscle tension, which can further exacerbate feelings of anxiety. It is difficult for individuals to properly manage their anxiety and retain a sense of well-being because of the interaction between various brain regions and systems while they are under the influence of worry. This interaction can generate a cycle of increased stress responses and impaired emotional regulation. The levels of stress hormones have increased. For the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, anxiety has a significant impact on the brain's ability to regulate the stress reactions of the body. The fight or flight reaction is triggered by the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the release of stress chemicals such as adrenaline and cortisol. As a result of this flood of hormones, the body is better prepared to respond to perceived dangers because it heightens attention, increases heart rate, improves reflexes, and stimulates blood supply to muscles. This reaction is necessary for immediate survival, but it becomes problematic when anxiety continues to be present. This leads to the persistent activation of these stress hormones even when there is no actual threat to the individual. After the initial stress response has been completed, the parasympathetic nervous system will normally begin to work toward restoring equilibrium by slowing the heart rate and encouraging relaxation. On the other hand, a brain that is affected by anxiety may have difficulty disengaging from this heightened state of alertness, which results in the continuous release of stress hormones and prevents the body from completely resting. Because of this, anxiety can result in a protracted state of increased tension, which can interfere with rational thought and the ability to make decisions. This ongoing stimulation of the stress response not only makes feelings of anxiety worse, but also has the potential to lead to chronic health concerns, such as cardiovascular troubles and a reduction in immune function. When it comes to breaking this cycle, preventing symptoms from becoming worse, and increasing general mental well-being, it is essential to address anxiety at an early stage through the intervention of suitable treatment. Restoring equilibrium to these physiological systems can be accomplished by the application of effective therapies, which in turn support both mental and physical health. The amygdala and the hippocampus both changed. According to studies that have been conducted on the impact of anxiety on the brain, there are significant alterations that take place in two crucial regions, the amygdala and the hippocampus. The amygdala, which is defined as a cluster of gray matter in the shape of an almond, plays a crucial role in the processing of emotions, particularly those that are associated with anger and fear. Chronic worry can cause the amygdala to undergo hypertrophy, often known as growth. This development amplifies the fear response of the brain and makes responses to perceived threats even more severe. The hyperactivity that occurs in the amygdala is associated with increased feelings of emotional distress, as well as an exaggerated perception of risks. Stress, on the other hand, has the opposite effect on the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain that plays an important role in learning and memory. Under the effect of extended anxiety, the hippocampus, which operates in conjunction with the amygdala to maintain emotional memory and contextualize fear, tends to shrink because of this interaction. As a result of this atrophy, the capacity to develop and retrieve memories is impaired, the ability to reliably recall events from the past is complicated, and the capacity to associate fear with particular settings is disrupted. Consequently, those who suffer from anxiety disorders may have difficulty recalling scary experiences, as well as avoiding particular locations that are connected with previous anxiety. This highlights how the interaction between different parts of the brain influences memory, learning, and the regulation of emotions. Rationalizing presents several challenges. The effects of anxiety on brain function are not limited to raising the intensity of emotional responses. It also disrupts the delicate equilibrium that exists between important parts of the brain that are involved in decision-making and emotional regulation. When anxiety affects the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, it impairs the brain's ability to effectively regulate stress and danger. If you suffer from anxiety, you should get professional help. The prefrontal cortex, which generally assists in modulating these responses with logic and reason, becomes less regulated and more reactive, which causes the amygdala, which is essential for processing fear and emotional responses, to become more reactive. This disturbance may result in an excessive fear response, in which the perceived dangers are heightened, and it becomes more difficult to create rational and calm reactions. As a consequence of this, people who experience elevated levels of anxiety may find themselves caught in a cycle in which their emotional responses outweigh their ability to engage in cognitive analysis and problem solving. As a result of the reduced influence of the prefrontal cortex, the brain has difficulty applying logical reasoning to emotional events. This frequently results in increased feelings of distress and an inability to effectively control or mitigate anxiety. This weaker link not only makes it more difficult for individuals to handle stressful situations, but also maintains a cycle of anxiety that can influence a variety of elements of everyday living as well as overall well-being. There is depression. Both the influence of anxiety on the hippocampus and the complicated interaction that exists between mental health and cognitive capabilities are highlighted by this phenomenon. Chronic anxiety causes the hippocampus, which plays a crucial role in the development of memories and the control of emotions, to become impaired. This makes it difficult for individuals to not just remember happy experiences, but also to engage in constructive problem-solving and decision-making. This cognitive disruption frequently results in a loop of increased stress and decreased emotional resilience, which can exacerbate pre-existing mental health issues and contribute to the development of new ones. Individuals can be driven toward unhealthy coping techniques such as substance misuse in their search for relief from anxiety as the consequences of anxiety on the brain continue to develop. As a result of this quest for a brief reprieve, which frequently backfires, aggravating both the initial mental health difficulties and bringing additional complexities, including the potential of addiction, a multifaceted challenge is created, which requires intervention tactics that are both thorough and successful. Final thoughts. As a conclusion, anxiety has a major and multifaceted impact on the brain, which results in significant changes to the structure and function of the organization. The amygdala and the hippocampus are two of the key brain regions that undergo major alterations when an individual is experiencing persistent worry. The increased activity of the amygdala contributes to an enhanced perception of threat, whereas the atrophy of the hippocampus decreases memory and the ability to comprehend contextual information. As a result of these alterations, the equilibrium between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerve systems is disrupted, which results in persistent physical symptoms and an inability to adequately control stress. The weakening of the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex further hinders the ability to make rational decisions and regulate emotions, which in turn perpetuates a cycle of increased anxiety and emotional misery. The interaction of these factors not only makes the treatment of anxiety more difficult, but also makes it more difficult. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Your support helps us create more awesome content.